The lithium-ion battery manufacturing industry in India is at a nascent stage at present. However, the country holds the potential to emerge as the key manufacturer of lithium-ion batteries over the next few years. Let's see what the experts have to say. I would like to invite Sarwan Singh, Managing Partner, Frost and Sullivan, to moderate the panel discussion on cell and battery manufacturing. Is India ready? Over to you, Mr. Singh.
A very good morning to everybody and a very warm welcome to the ETAuto EV Conclave 2021. Firstly, many thanks to the ET team to bring this together and bring an excellent group of speakers today to discuss this interesting topic around cell and battery manufacturing and the potential in India and what policies and frameworks are needed to make sure that we in India can excel in the era of battery and electrification. I'm going to start by quickly introducing my panelists, and then I'll do a 10-minute presentation and set the scene, and then we'll deep dive into a panel discussion with the panelists. So let me start by quickly sharing my screen here first. So I have an impressive group of panelists today. If I was batting for India and playing against England, I bet I've got a good chance to even bat on a very spinning wicket today. So we have to start with Diego. Diego is the chairman and managing director of Piaggio India. He's been in India for about 4 years now as the head of the region, and he is in charge for overall business development, exports, and for overall operations of Piaggio in India. He comes from the lovely area of Tuscany, an area that I absolutely love. And one thing interesting about this panel, which I just found out very recently, is that all of us with maybe are very keen bikers. So I think we'll definitely have a few questions on how do we see the switch to e-bikes in the future. We also have Chetan Mani. I guess I don't need to introduce Chetan. He's a very well-known entrepreneur and technologist in India for over 20 years. One could say he's the father of electrification in India. He was the inventor of Riva in 1999, much ahead of even Elon Musk in his vision of bringing electrification. From electric cars, now he's moved into the charging infrastructure and is now the leader of the Sun Mobility operation, which he set up in April 2017. He sits on many panels and government frameworks in helping develop policies. He's won many awards, including the BBC Top Gear Award. And I'm also proud to say, Chetan, and glad to see that you have won also Frost and Sullivan Visionary Innovation Leadership Award. So big credit to you. And like Diego, Chetan is also into motorbikes, cycling as a hobby. We also have Atul. Atul heads the energy system division of Panasonic. As you all know, Panasonic is one of the global leaders in the cell manufacturing space. So we'll hear more from Atul about Panasonic and its strategy on electrification. But also, I like to hear more about what he thinks about energy storage solutions. His responsibilities in India include end-to-end P&L management of the energy business, including sales, business development, engineering projects. And Atul is very much into running, biking, and yoga. Yoga is one thing that I want to really try. My wife tried it the other day, and she says that I have to get into it. Then last is Anil Paryani. He's the CEO of Automotive Power. Very big thanks to you, Anil. Anil is joining us from California. And so really thanks that you are taking the time. He's CEO on AMP Automotive Power. He worked with Tesla Power Systems, and he's been in the EV space since the 90s. He's got over 30 patents in his name in battery and charging technology. And like us, he's into sports and scuba diving. So, and it looks like you definitely like going into places where nobody's been before. So scuba diving, cell battery technology, battery management systems. So big warm welcome to everyone. So let me start by setting the scene. Let me share a global overview and a regional overview. Myself, Sarwan Singh, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I head Frost & Sullivan's automotive practice globally, and I'm also head of the region for Middle East, South Asia, and Africa, based out of Dubai. So let's start with where was electric vehicles and how has that journey been, and where is that journey heading to? So if you look at the last 10 years, and this slide covers all types of electrification, mild, full, battery and plug-in. So we reached about 11 and a bit % last year in 2020. There was a big jump, as you can see, from 2019. And thanks to COVID, we've seen an acceleration. What is interesting is that the gap between hybrid and electrics is slowly narrowing down. I mean, hybrids was made larger part of the vehicle portfolio when it came to electrification, but very much we are seeing that the electric vehicles, especially full battery electric vehicles, are growing rapidly. If I go into the numbers for 2020, you can see here, and if you look at this chart here, you can see there's some markets which are very much mild and full. But as you can see here, Europe, interestingly, Europe had more sales of electric vehicles last year, as you can see here, than China. Before that, China has been the leader. Now, when and the Frost and Sullivan team, when they had done their forecast for 2020, they had predicted about 2.2, 2.3 million EV sales, which were more or less flat over 2019. But as all forecasters and analysts have had a tough time with COVID, thanks to certain scrappage schemes and certain policies to stimulate the economic growth, especially in Europe, we've seen EVs have really dominated, and they clocked in about 3 million in sales. That included battery and plug-in vehicles. Now, what is interesting is the number of models out there. So for all electric vehicles, there are over 600 models out there. And if you just combine the total battery and plug-in, that number is reaching close to 500. And that, I think that is a magic number. As we know in the auto industry, it's the volume of vehicle models and the choices that customers need to be able to achieve and have a choice of which vehicles they want to buy. It's interesting to also see that the car park for electric vehicles is now reaching 30 million. And even on the charging sector side, we have over 1 million chargers. In terms of sales for different geographies, you can see here, China had a small growth, but not as much. China, as we all know, was quite an amazing when it came to the auto industry. If anything, it rescued the global auto industry by ensuring that it still maintained healthy growth rates despite COVID challenges. Interesting is some of the European countries, look at Germany, big growth, mainly driven by Volkswagen. Interesting to see on the right-hand side how many Volkswagen models are in the have the best market share, especially in Europe. And if in the next slide, you see how many car sales different OEMs had. Of course, Tesla, very impressive, just a little short of 500,000 sales. But I think it's Volkswagen Group and a few others like Daimler, for example, which tell you that in 2022 and in the years to come, you will see high volume growth from some of these OEMs. A bit disappointing is some of the Chinese OEMs. For example, BYD actually had sales decline when it came to electric vehicles in 2020. What is also interesting is I mentioned the number of models, but also the choice of models in certain segments. For example, SUVs. Now, we all know the growth of SUVs and how SUV growth has led to a big shift, and they even say that death of the D segment, for example. What is interesting to see is also the number of electric vehicle model choices customers have now. Over 150 SUV models across multiple segments are out there available today. Now, the big question is, so that was last 10 years and 2020, what does the future hold? So the Frost and Sullivan team modeled this slide here. Firstly, interesting is they are not very positive that we'll reach 100 million sales in the near future, and COVID has definitely had an impact on that. But what is interesting is their feedback and their view on how much electrification we will see. So you can see here by 2030, they're predicting that the ICE engine will only hold about 41% of the total share. About 60% will be hybrid and electric, and 100% electric will be close to about 30%. Again, that is something worth debating within the panel a little later on. And let's look at the same picture for India. Even in India, we expect high growth in EVs. On the e-bus market, very interesting. I've been working on the e-bus market in India, and we expect that about 45% of all buses sold in India will be electric. I mean, the electric revolution in buses is just unbelievable, including the new business models of GCC contracts that are being bought in by the state transport authorities. Even on LCV market, 1 in 4 could be electric by 2030, especially the smaller, less 1.5, 2-ton vehicles. But I think the revolution really in India is in the 2-wheeler and the 3-wheeler space. And that's something, again, we'll speak to our panelists, especially I'd love to hear from Diageo what he thinks of this big revolution in 2- and 3-wheeler electrification. Let's move and talk a little bit about the battery chemistries. Now, we do have a good choice of battery chemistries. What you don't see on this slide is the solid state batteries. Now, if you look at battery chemistry, there seems to be a little bit of a divide globally. Firstly, as you can see here, Tesla, Panasonic, very much in the NCA space. Tesla, as we know now with the new Model 3, is also building LFP. Whereas you see the Europeans and the Koreans very much in the NMC space, much better energy density with NMC, a little bit more expensive, but they believe it's worth paying that extra for just having that weight to energy density ratio. The Chinese very much focusing on LFP, a little bit more cheaper technology, and preferred. And then you look at the configuration, cylindrical prismatic pouch. Typically in the car application, prismatic is what is preferred. Pouch we have seen is mainly for commercial vehicles, mainly for bus applications. Now, in terms of what different chemistries are favored by different OEMs, you can see here NMC very much, like I mentioned, favored by the Europeans, LFP very much favored by the Chinese, and NCA very much is Tesla. When you take the same and break it down by the suppliers, you can see LG Chem and CATL very much NMC. CATL, which is now the biggest cell supplier in the world, also very much also into LFP. Interesting to see is both LG Chem and CATL, how they have grown so rapidly over the last 5 to 6 years. What is disappointing here is not a single Indian cell or battery manufacturer on this list. Talking about battery energy density, there is a lot of bets being placed on solid state. It's expected to be one of the revolutionary battery technology. Companies like Toyota are very much focusing on it. Again, this is something I like to talk to with the panelists to understand what they believe could be the next generation battery technologies or cell technologies that could be preferred going forward. Now, a very interesting debate always is about pricing. And the Frost & Sullivan team done some pricing analysis here. I started working on electrification back in 2004, 2005 with Nissan when they were launching the Leaf. Let me tell you, when the Leaf was launched, the battery pack was $1,700 per kilowatt hour. Today, the battery pack pricing, depending on, I believe, the Tesla LFP is around 135. The Tesla NMC and NCA is, I believe, around $150 per kilowatt hour to the pack. So you can see how rapidly the prices have declined. It is expected the battery prices for a pack level will decline around about $75 to $80 by 2030. Possibly solid state could even bring it further down. So the big question then everybody asks is, at what price does EVs become completely, when they can completely shift the IC market? And I guess that number is really around 60 to 70, and it's all about TCO, especially in fleet. So if the diesel technology, the prices of gasoline goes up, the TCO parity, which we believe will be achievable around about 2024, 2025 timeframe. Looking at the energy storage market globally, we believe in Frost that there is about 8.3 to 8,300 to 8,400 gigawatt hour of electric energy storage based lithium based battery energy storage applications out there. As you can see on this slide, we believe about 86% of that is going to come from EV applications in mobile and about 13% from stationary storage. So something I'll be asking Atul to talk more about. And if you take the same picture for India, we believe actually in India, there is a larger opportunity for stationary storage application, about 22% as compared to what we saw in the previous slide. And again, where we see the opportunities in energy storage are around grid connectivity, backup power, telecom, including also my father who's based in Chandigarh had just recently put his solar panels and he's selling his energy back into the grid. And I think absolutely fantastic idea. Could the future of energy in India be completely decentralized, decarbonized, and digital thanks to next generation energy storage solutions? And I personally think that's very much possible. Looking at India in terms of demand for batteries, as you can see here, the Frost & Sullivan scenario is going up from 1.2 gigawatts to about 300 gigawatt per hour. The government goal is to reach about 50 gigawatt hours by 2025. So the question is, will we be importing? Will we be an exporter? Do we need more capacity? Do we need more policy frameworks? And I think that's something we'll discuss shortly. Apart from the fact that energy, we have applications. And again, when we look at the whole battery and the industry value chain, I think we have to look at everything from the metals coming out, the lithium, the iron, all the way to the first life, second life, and possibly even the third life, including recycling. And within the second life, we see quite a few applications, for example, in forklifts, for example, energy storage, and so on. And not to mention also battery recycling. We did some work recently in India, and we expect that over 24,300 megawatts of used battery potential is available in India. Not to mention, there's also a huge potential of recycling the what they call the urban recycling market, which is our cell phone batteries potentially in India. So with that, let me pass on to the panel. And let's start our panel discussion. So let me start with Diego. Diego, firstly, could you tell us a little bit about Piaggio's electric strategy in India, and what is your views on the slides and the analysis that I shared?
First of all, good morning to everybody, and thanks for inviting me to this very interesting panel discussion today. Okay, worth to mention when talking about the strategy of Piaggio Group for electric mobility in India, but I would rather also talk about the focus of the group on a global basis. Worth to mention that among the OEM that are involved into automotive business, mainly two-wheeler and three-wheeler on a global basis, we have been among the first one to start working on electric more than 3 decades. As of now. So we always believe that electric, hybrid, so mixed thermal electric could have become a very viable and very powerful solution for mobility of scooter, bikes, and auto rickshaw on a global basis. Worth to mention that the first hybrid scooter was launched by the group in 2010 itself. So with a mix thermal and lithium-ion cell technology battery on board. So when we came here to India, we looked very interesting of a trend and the big push coming from central and local government to spread electric mobility. Worth to mention that when I joined here in 2017, at that point in time, there was a clear declaration from Prime Minister that he wanted to go full electric for two-wheeler and three-wheeler by 2030. That was very powerful and very aggressive target placed for OEM. So at that point in time, we started working immediately on our version, electric version of our three-wheeler vehicle. We started in 2019, at the end of 2019, with right in cooperation with the Chetan and his group, Some Mobility. So I'm particularly glad that he's joining the discussion today, because we had long path together and very dense path together here in India since then. We started with battery swap because we are thinking at that point in time that was a very interesting proposal for increasing the spread of electric mobility for auto rickshaw here in India. And if it was not for COVID, I think that as of now, we would have resulted much higher spread and penetration of this kind of vehicle pan-India. Recently, we have started also with the introduction of a fixed battery version, both of our passenger and cargo version. In general, I think that to be more precise to your question, I think that in perspective, I fully agree that three-wheeler in general is a very fertile field for electric mobility due to various reasons, because the customer is typically very sensitive to cost per kilometer. And now with the level of price that diesel and petrol in general has reached in India, more than broken the barrier of 100 rupees per liter diesel in many states, means that there is even more affordability and more convenience for the customer in terms of cost per kilometer to go for electric solution. And so these are vehicles that are mainly meant for, how to say, earning money and for livelihood. I think that, again, this is a very fertile field. Our strategy is to provide, in general, to all our customers a full agnostic solution. So we want to give them the possibility to choose between IC and electric. And when we are talking about electric, possibility to choose between both battery swap technology and fixed battery technology, because both of them, in my perspective, have their pros and cons in respect to customer interest and to customer needs. So in the next couple of years, we want to complete our gamma with full electric solution developed in-house. and with both solution, both swappable and fixed battery. And the trend that you showed in terms of heavily decreasing cost of battery in the mid-long perspective, the next 3 to 5 years, definitely is a determinant factor to make the penetration of this vehicle even more faster than what we have seen as of now. So I agree that breaking the barrier of being below $100 per kilowatt hour is definitely a breakthrough for this technology. And depending by the technology applied, now we are using NMC technology for our fixed battery solution, because we think it's the most affordable and giving the higher advantages in terms of range, performance, and whatever it is. So, but the breaking the barrier $100 per kilowatt hour will definitely take the cost of ownership of this vehicle unbeatable. Also respect to CNG solution that now is the most competitive in comparison to electric. So the increase of localization of components in India for electric powertrain that now is not so high. And again, this is a big limitation, because for most of our powertrain, we are still importing a lot of subcomponents from South India, and this is a limitation due to import duty, availability of material, whatever it is. So having this trend of localization in perspective of components, decrease of cost per battery per kilowatt hour, and further push from government in terms of policies, like for example, daily policies. We want to see more daily policies in India, not only limited to Delhi. I think that these three factors can contribute further to increase the penetration of electric into three-wheeler field in the range of 30 to 50% within the span of the next 5 years. This is my opinion as of now. If these three factors that I was mentioning will happen, I think that not less than 50% of a fleet, a new fleet that every OEM is selling within the next span of next 5 years will be fully electric, or hybrid solution, electric and internal.
Thank you, Diego. One quick question before I pass on is, what is your battery and cell manufacturing and sourcing strategy? In-house versus outsourced? Will you localize it in India?
No, our strategy is to go in outsourcing. So we have a strong player that are supporting us here in India. The lithium-ion cell technology, MNC, is the technology that we are following as of now, and but obviously cell are imported from outside India, but final battery manufacturing and assembly is realized here in India, which is definitely essential for maintaining very lean and very fast our supply chain.
Excellent. Thank you, Diego. Chetan, over to you. Firstly, big congratulations on the huge success of Sun Mobility. I've been following up on all the contracts you've been signing and your vision of putting chargers in every petrol station. I think that's the way to go. Could you tell us a little bit about your business and both on charging and battery swapping? And also, what do you see as an opportunity in India?
Thanks, Arvind. I think that, doing electrics for 20 years, I started to see that why aren't they taking off the way they should be, right? Especially in markets like India. And the 4 key concerns I saw was related to range anxiety, long refueling time, lack of infrastructure, and the most important was cost. And unless we fundamentally address these issues, the combination of technology and business models, we weren't going to see that kind of growth, right? Interestingly, if you take the batteries out of internal combustion engine vehicle and the chargers and the battery management system and the thermal management system, you can get cost of electric vehicles to be cost neutral to internal combustion engine vehicles today, and probably lower in the future as the price of power electronics and powertrains come down further. On the other side, if you think of your battery amortization and electricity amortization, you can get it cheaper than gasoline on diesel. And so you suddenly, using battery swapping, start to create a model that creates a low risk for someone to come, right? It's battery as a service. And it's very important because when I talk to customers, who even have, say, a two-wheeler, while they do only 40 kilometers a day, once a month they may do 100. And then they buy because of that 1% requirement. And if they do 100, they want, at least 120. And if they want 120, then they discount what the OEM tells them, which means the OEM's going to tell them 140. So when you start to add this up, even for a small scooter to make it really work well at that level, you'd want at least 4 kilowatt hours of battery systems, right, on this area. And you need, of course, a powertrain that's equivalent to at least 100 cc in performance. So when you put these metrics together, and even if you say tomorrow battery costs is, $100, $120, right? The bill of material is more than 2x of the electric. So it still won't make sense in certain market segments in India unless you were trying to read even at low battery pricing. So the challenges I think are there. And then club with that is the challenges around infrastructure. Not everyone has those charging points, and club with that is the challenges of our temperatures, right? At 45 ambient in North India, you get temperatures 45 to 50 in your batteries, which you don't have air conditioning and cooling systems in small form factors. So in the shared mobility, in the 2 and 3 wheeler, not what you talked about, but 85% of India moves in 2 wheelers, 3 wheelers, and buses, unlike the car side of it. We see that these models have a very viable solution. And our focus has been to create an open architecture platform where any OEM can come on board, and we help integrate them, right, on quickly. Our partnerships across the ecosystems allows us to have partnerships with oil companies who are putting infrastructure, but also with our OEM partners who in their dealers have an infrastructure. So for us, I think it's a collective solution where partners come together in the new area, and how can they all win as a result of this? The consumer wins, the OEMs win, the dealerships win, the oil companies and others who are already in this business with this transformation win. I think it's only when you create a total ecosystem of win-win across this that you can have it. So our model is around that. It's about really creating impact. We've seen rickshaw drivers who've been earning 30-40% more because they can swap and do more kilometers a day, and to increase their livelihood. That's amazing. That's what I think electrification should be doing. It should be sustainable and making a meaningful impact on people's lives. So exciting journey, and great to see Diego as one of our partners and all of you here. But we feel that this can be very transformational, and battery swapping would have a very large portion in these segments in India.
Thank you, Chetan. Just a quick follow-up question on that. Battery swapping hasn't worked in Europe. We know what Better Place tried. It's working in China. Do you think it'll work in India, and will it work over and beyond 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers?
I think that the early easy entries are 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, and buses, right? And cars, I think, can come in, but probably more where you're driving 150 kilometers plus per day, which means it needs to come into taxis, right? I think from private transportation, it will not make sense. If someone's doing 40 kilometers a day, going to work and come back, neither do you make money, and you're sweating your asset. So you have to sweat your asset to give a better value proposition, right? So I would say that those segments make the most sense on this area. And if you notice, Europe is more on personal mobility. So obviously it's the last piece, and cars. So when you think of that low-hanging fruit, it's the highest hanging fruit right now. And so you're not seeing that penetration. But solutions for India need to be India-centric. And therefore, I think we have to innovate around things that we believe will make a difference in our country.
Thank you, Chetan. Thank you for that. Let's move to Anil. Anil, tell us a little bit more about AMP. What does the company specialize and the business model? And in particular, I'm interested to hear your views on localizing battery electronics in India, including making battery management systems in India.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here from California at this time zone. So AMP, we actually have an office in Bangalore. We really set out as a goal to bring Tesla-like technology to where it's needed the most. So as you mentioned, I was early on at Tesla, there for 6 years. We did a lot of great things. And one of my life goals got checked off, seeing EVs to become in its fruition. However, where this technology is needed most is places like India and Asia. And I think one thing that COVID has allowed us to see in the world is blue skies for the first time, right? So people have realized, like, hey, electric vehicles can be a game changer. I think as India is becoming, very, let me call it an economic powerhouse in the world, is coming up in society. People now have become aware. So AMP, what we do is we look at energy holistically. We do battery management and charging technology. We try to, and I don't want to say try to, we get the best battery utilization that's available. Battery utilization we define as the longest battery runtime, the longest battery lifetime, and we can talk about this, but fast charging. So we want to decrease the charge time, so for all our customers, they can get the most out of the battery.
Thank you, Anil. And Anil, you worked with Tesla. What can you tell us, or what can you share from Tesla's strategy that we in India can learn from?
Yeah, it's great. Tesla is very vertically integrated, as everyone knows. They make their own cells. And I got to say, early on, it was not done by choice. We were let down by suppliers. And as far as like, hey, can you meet the timeline? Can you meet the performance? Can you meet the cost? So a lot of things were brought in-house. Ultimately, cell manufacturing has been brought in-house. For AMP, there's a gold rush out there. There's a lot of OEMs trying to be like Tesla. And there's a saying, when there's a gold rush, don't go mining for gold, make pickaxes and blue jeans. And that's what we're trying to do. So what Tesla's done, no other supplier in the world has been able to satisfy. So they've done it in-house. AMP, we're trying to bring Tesla, or let's say better than Tesla-like technology, because that's the benchmark, to the world's OEMs. That's our goal.
Thank you, Anand. Thanks. Atul, over to you. Tell us about what do you view is the potential of energy storage solutions in India, and where do you think this is? Is it more residential, commercial, or grid capacity applications?
So thanks for inviting me over here. I think this is a very, very pertinent question, especially while we're talking about electrification of automobile as well, because I think in order to be able to drive the electrification of mobility, we also need to ensure that the grid is resilient enough to be able to really provide that kind of an infrastructure and a platform. Especially most of the times what we end up ignoring. I'll give you an example. Many times people have a lot of discussion, animated discussion, and there is a clear side taken that you need a fast charging in order to electric mobility to become successful, popular, adaptable, etc. And many times people are really not talking about what is the grid behind, whether it is able to really provide that kind of power to be able to install so many fast chargers. That's one example. We all know that India has done a lot of work in electrification per se in last, let's say 1 decade or so, but a lot more needs to be done. We still do not have a very resilient grid, even if it comes to large cities of India. And once the mobility reaches everywhere, it's going to create a lot of problems. The other problem which we are already we are already seeing, and we are going to see more and more, is that we are adding more and more renewable into our grid, which means that the power itself is not very, very predictable and certain all the times, the way it happens with any other thermal or nuclear or other forms of power. And it's all dependent on the sunlight or the wind and stuff like that. So I would say there is a huge potential to be able to balance all this and provide the right infrastructure. In my mind, the distribution segment is the one which is really the most important to focus on at this point of time, because that's where most of the transactions are going to happen, and they already happen, not really at the transmission level, because we have been strengthening a lot of transmission level infrastructure in past, and we continue to do that. And that's part of long-term planning of the country done by CERC and those agencies. But distribution level uncertainties and issues keep cropping up all the time of the year, especially in cities like Delhi, for example. You see extreme temperatures of 45 and 47s and 48s, and suddenly there is a huge demand of air conditioning. And this really takes you to a place where it is beyond the peak for which the distribution system has been already designed. Now you add so much of renewable into it, and you add so much of electrification of vehicles into it, it's going to be humongous, and the infrastructure is not going to really hold up to the extent that it will be able to provide the right amount of energy. And that's where I think energy storage system and the energy storage batteries and any other form of energy storage for that matter would be the most useful to begin with. And that's where I think it's also easier to deploy to begin with.
Thank you, Atul. Thank you very much. So let me open questions now for all the panelists, and I'll let you pick who wants to answer them. So I think the first question I would like to ask the panelists is, you saw my slide, very disappointing. There are so many Asian manufacturers up there, but India is not on that list. But like India did from 2G, they jumped to 4G. Do you think there is a potential for India to jump to solid state or become a global leader in manufacturing of cells and batteries?
I'm Indian. I was born in the US. My dad said, you're going to be an electrical engineer at a very young age. And this is a little bit of a cultural thing. There's good jobs, and I think the two options, if you're smart in India, you go to electrical engineering or computer science. Fundamentally, feels like material science and chemistry needs to be promoted and pivoted from the universities. There's, even on the US, there's a shortage of this expertise in the world. And even you could say mechanical engineering, because battery packs are very complicated mechanical, frames and structures are needed to handle the safety events. So I would say first thing is the education. We need more material science, chemists, manufacturing, and mechanical engineers in India.
Yeah, totally agree. Anil, I'm also an electrical engineer, and my father said electrical, mechanical. So Chetan, over to you. Anything to add to this?
Yeah, so I think, it's not to be waiting for the Holy Grail. You have solutions today that work on this area. If you're seeing growth at 30% year on year in the world market, the current solutions work, right? We're today being able to create solutions where consumers can buy an electric vehicle the same price and cost of energy similar with today's technology. So the first thing we should be doing is promoting where we are today. And a lot of the pieces of the technology are not necessarily related to just the cell side of it, right? So when you think of thermal management, the battery management, the infrastructure, the setting up all of the lines, 30 to 40% of the value, especially in small form factors, maybe even higher, are on other systems that can come in right now, and they could be fairly open architecture compatible. So the way I look at it is, we have a module of a battery pack. Today it has an NMC technology. Tomorrow it could have a different form factor. It could be and the form factor would be the same, but it could have a cell technology. It could be pouch, prismatic, or cylindrical. It could be NMC or another technology or solid state. We don't care, right? If you just put it in, if that's the next best secret sauce coming in, you put that in, integrate and give it to customers, right? So in our strategy as a country, we should be starting at a parallel level, right? First, get all the other systems to work to make electric vehicles viable on this area, both from a technology and business model, right? Start with cell technologies that are today workable on this area, because they still are going to. And if these breakthroughs come in, yes, you should adopt them, right? But these breakthroughs that are coming in, we're not clear about all of them and where they are and where they would land. And probably some of the manufacturing processes would be very different. And so there's always a scare that, what if you put up 50 gigawatt hours of plant? What would you do on this area? I think the demand's going to be so big, and there are going to be different technologies, right? Coexisting. There will be LFP, there will be NMC, there will be a little bit of NCA. In NMC, there are going to be different ratios of how you put it for different applications. And there's going to be solid state, and there's going to be quick charge solutions, and maybe LTOs, right? It's agnostic that we can't do one area, but we should follow a path which is consumer oriented, but invest in R&D so you're on top of it and look at it. So that's my 2 cents.
Absolutely makes sense. Atul or Diego, anything to add to this?
I fully agree with what Chetan was saying, in the sense that we don't have to be so much in a hurry to develop a new kind of technology for battery cell manufacturing. I think that the level of trade-off between cost, performance of the battery pack that we are available now in India are already taking this technology very much competitive. Even more if you consider subsidy coming from government or whatever it is. So in terms of cost per kilometer, including everything, acquisition price, subsidy, registration, road tax, and whatever it is, if you buy an EV, a passenger EV, as of now, it is already at par in terms of cost per kilometer respect to CNG. So there is no so urgent need to develop a new technology. I think that what the ecosystem should have to focus now is to work on, first of all, localization of components, as I was saying. But definitely is a big entry barrier for making this solution more viable in India. Having a, heavy cohesive efforts from all agencies to spread infrastructure, both for the charging of fixed battery solution and battery swap. So there must be a high diffusion of this infrastructure in the field that cannot be taken by OEM or independent agency, definitely. But must be a required effort, a required push also from government from this point of view. So I think that if these two things happen, we create already the base, a strong base in terms of economy of scale to make this solution very much convenient also from business point of view. It is clear that now, and nowadays we have to be very clear from this point of view. Nowadays, this is something that all OEM are doing in perspective. So we do not see as of now in the immediate term the possibility to make this business for us very much profitable, but we want to invest to make it, how to say, viable, to create the base so that more investment will get attracted and the solution will become more viable, profitable, and convenient in the mid-long term. This is what is happening as of now. So the shorter is this period in which we make this business really profitable for us as OEM and for the final customer, the more we create the base, and the more then there will be the possibility for new technology to come in place to help further spread, but not in the immediate term. I don't think this is the priority as of now. We need to consolidate what is available as of now and make it more convenient and profitable for everybody.
Thank you, Diego. Maybe moving on, and I'll ask Atul this first. Atul, what do you think the government could do in terms of policies to localize both cell and battery manufacturing, including for energy storage solutions?
Well, I think, first of all, let me clarify your question a little bit. When you, even in the last question, you said it's disappointing not to see Indian company. Did you mean indigenous technology by an Indian company, or did you just mean that somebody manufacturing in India? And also for this question.
Both, actually. I'm, as long as I see an Indian name, makes me proud on that list.
Look, I think there are two ways to address this. One, I completely agree with what Anil said. We don't have really that widespread knowledge in India to really take on such a development of a new technology per se as of today. And that's where our we probably need to go back to a root of our education system itself, that you don't promote research, you don't promote multi-dimensional or let's say a multidisciplinary development of the technology, because you need chemists, you need so many other people to really develop a technology and then be able to manufacture those technologies in India. And if you do develop indigenous technologies, then obviously there would be an Indian company which would be manufacturing not just this, but also any other state-of-the-art technology. Otherwise, you will see either a joint venture or a MNC manufacturing in India. And for anybody to manufacture in India, there are 2 or 3 very important dimensions. For sure, government policy is extremely important, that we have all these ease of doing business and, licenses and all those things which government is already doing, and they're also providing subsidy. But the biggest driver for anybody to look at India as a manufacturing location is the local demand, especially in a product which is a high technology and highly automated sort of a process where there is hardly any manual labor per se required, which means that you have a lot of raw material which you can pretty much in the global supply chain import if you don't have it in India, or buy from someone else, or you procure locally. But what you do is you convert them into the final product. And this is done pretty much by the application of capital and very little of labor and more of your technology, the automation and the machines and stuff like that. Therefore, the advantage of one to manufacture in location A or B would really depend on what is the local demand over there. So if China sees a large number of manufacturers in China, it is pretty much because China has a large demand. And government has played a large role in that. I do agree that they have provided huge amount of subsidy. They have really done what was required. So one of the ways government can really support this in India is to provide a larger amount of subsidy. For example, now I do not know whether government in India can really do it, looking at their financial position, etc. But pretty much as far as the current policies are concerned, there is definitely a large push which has come in terms of FAME 2, in terms of creating other programs. So I think this is where governments can really help.
Yeah, thank you, Atul.
I can jump in.
Please.
Yeah, just to add, the U.S. also lacks the talent, material science, chemists, and Tesla relied on Panasonic to set up the battery manufacturing. The first major battery manufacturing plant in the US was basically fundamentally Japanese technology. So India can do the same. There's enough buying power. So that's my comment.
Yeah, Anil. Okay, thank you. And Atul, is Panasonic looking to set up manufacturing in India?
Tough one for me to answer in a public forum.
Okay, fair enough. No
But
worries.
I can only tell you that we always, as a company, would be definitely looking at all such potential opportunities. And this would be a business decision, to be honest, Sarwant. It wouldn't be just driven by only Atmanirbhar Bharat or any other, emotional thing. So, yes.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
Kevin,
Now,
on this,
sorry, please.
Part for Indian, I think there's, we always focus on made in India, and I think we should be thinking made in India a little bit differently, right? It should be designed in India too, right?
Yes.
If you want to build capability, everyone thinks we'll get something in manufacture. I'll give us an example, right? We have 5 times more engineers and people in our design team than we have in our manufacturing, although we make everything in-house, right? So how does policies say that if things are designed in India, they would get also benefit, right?
Yeah.
Everyone thinking of factories putting out, right? But that's not where the intellectual power is going to come. If you want to be a long-term powerhouse in the country, your design, the made in India should include design in India. That would be one. Second part, it should include criteria that benefit the country, right? I'll give you one example in our case, right? We're looking at, because of swapping, use half the number of batteries, half the size of battery, because you can swap it multiple times. And our life is probably 2 to 3x more, which means you use 1/6 the amount of assets to create and drive a vehicle the same for its life cycle, right? Now, if you're using 1/6 the assets and your raw materials are not available in the country long-term on this area, right? How are you promoting technologies and solutions that bring in efficiency and criteria? So in addition to the normal things that the government has put out, which are very, on subsidies and concessions, I would think that these two could start to create India as a powerhouse, because we start to push the engineering and the development side and give that benefit on this front. And it should be linked to that. If you've designed and built the battery pack in-house in this India, it gets a different benefit than when you just licensed it from someone else and did it. Because you can pump that money back into R&D, right? And that's not clear. So we need to be more holistic about these policies, where it's great to get international players in here, and I don't disagree with that. But how do we at the parallelly develop 10, 20, 30, 50 players in India to come up in the next 3 to 5 years?
Thank you, Chetan. I totally agree. And that was actually going to be my question, and you already half addressed it. If you look at the value chain of EVs, and yes, you talked about design, and I work here in Middle East, and I say to the countries here, maybe you can't develop them, but maybe you can be leaders in deployment. So are there, apart from designing, are there other elements within that value chain where India can excel? For example, it comes to my mind, look at Taiwan. It's a global leader in power electronics, like making inverters, for example. So is there an opportunity as part of this value chain to localize? Anil, maybe coming from battery management, I was going to ask you first.
Well, so we are starting electronics manufacturing, PCB manufacturing in India. And I got to say, and Chetan, I agree with you about the design in India, but speaking from the US side, if you have manufacturing that's Asia, not China, there is a huge demand for that. China has not played their political cards correctly, and everyone is a little bit outside of China, a little bit looking for alternatives. And India has a huge opportunity to manufacture electronics, and I would say cells and battery packs. There will be a huge demand for the world if India can do that.
And India has lacked in semiconductor manufacturing, electronics manufacturing. So I personally think that is an area. Anybody else to add anything to this?
I think it's just not it's not just the battery management. I think that's the important part. Today we make, except for the cell, we make everything in India. So we're completely indigenous for all the systems. But I think there is an area of software and hardware will play a very large play across the ecosystem, from batteries to power electronics to vehicle control units to everything. So there are opportunities in India to create platform approaches which are high volume and scalable for the country, right? And transform manufacturing. What do I mean by that? If we think 15 years ago, when we look at mobile phones and everything, there were 1 or 2 players who were vertically integrated. They did everything. Today, if you look at it, within a year, a new company can come in, buy a screen from here, processor from there, battery from C, put an OS onto it, and sell it, right? You've democratized manufacturing, you democratize an open architecture platform, you democratize the way you look at technology. And think of that analogy in a two-wheeler or other areas, right? Where tomorrow you would have solutions that were plug and play, which came in very quickly, and you had scale along that area, but you still gave OEMs some amount of the software side that enabled them to get differentiation. That's very important. It's their brand, they need differentiation. So how do you create differentiation, but still standardization, right? And that done at scale could bring down cost structures tremendously, where the cells could, and modules are similar, electronics are highly scalable on this, and you have a bunch of systems like this that can be done. That to me can be a very large direction. And like India has led two-wheelers and other small cars, you could lead certain segments which are not necessarily the focus globally on this front. So that's what we should do is create a few areas where we can create a moat, where we become the company, the country in the world to be part of that. This needs a little bit more synergy between the industry and thinking of it of a larger picture, but it allows us to have a very different perspective of what we can do in the country.
Excellent. Thank you, Chetan. Anil, one question for you. GM wants to eliminate all types of wiring harnesses in EVs, and there is a discussion about having wireless technology connected at cell level. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, there's been tremendous advancement in what we call module to module communication. Right now, it used to be 4 wires. It's basically down to 2 wires. It's advanced quite a bit. The cost for a wire roughly in high volume is about 70 cents. So there's opportunities if a wireless system can cost, and sorry, I'm speaking in dollars, not rupees, can come down on a vehicle level to be sub $50, then there are opportunities. However, I don't think that right now the cost structure is that bad with the communication, what's been happening, and particularly the communication bus is called ISO-SPI. And right now there's a lot of IC manufacturers that have adopted that within a battery management system. So I don't see wireless technology being cost competitive in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and not to mention there could be some security issues with wireless technology. Yeah. Okay. India has a goal of 50 gigawatt hour production by 2025. What does the panel think about? Is it achievable? Is it too narrow a goal? Should we be more ambitious, or we're just not ready for it, or it's too early?
I think it's a good target to start off with, and maybe if it needs a relook in a couple of years from today, we can relook at and up it. This is a very dynamic industry. More OEMs come on board, policies come in, cost structures do. It's like India's almost like a 1-0, right? You hit that cost point, you're 10% above cost, your volume is pretty much zero, you're cost neutral. You have a small volume, no one wants to take a technology risk. You're 20% lower, you have an infinite market, right? So if you start to come along that cost curve faster, right, then you see this much quicker. Of course, you can't then turn on and just say a plant comes up overnight. It's going to be at least a 24-month lead time, then if things are aggressive, right? So I think setting that goal is right. I think what we did in renewable energies and set the 100 gigawatt target, for 2022, allowed us to beat the 2018 target way ahead, right? Which is actually supposed to be what we were supposed to be in 2022. We beat it in 2018, right? I think if we do the same thing, it starts to set the bigger picture of policy. If things go well, we're going to need a lot more like what your projections were, which is more like 120 or so that you had projected by that time on this area, but it's a good start.
Atul, maybe one for you. On the energy storage market, where do you see the most application in India? Are they in cloud computing? Are they in other telecom sector, others?
Let me tell you what, maybe as an example, I can tell you what we've done in last few years. Telecom has been one of the key driving sector for us as far as energy storage is concerned, and pretty much for 2 reasons. One, that it was really consuming a lot of diesel just to keep the towers on. In fact, in one of the conferences of telecom operators, when I visited there, one of the management CEO made a little bit sarcastic comment saying that when I was getting into tower business, but I later realized that I got into power business. Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge for them was to really keep them powered up, and they were consuming really billions of rupees just to run on diesel generator. And in spite of higher prices, what we had 5 years back or 4 years back for lithium ion versus today, this was a plain economic sense for them to really go ahead and replace or reduce the diesel generator usage dramatically by using lithium-ion batteries. So that's really just an example. We've done almost like 70 odd thousand telecom towers across the country in last 4-5 years, and maybe collectively the whole industry would have gone to more than 150,000. But this is a pointer to where the applications are. We still do not have reliable power 24/7, whereas this is a basic necessity to meet those very large economic growth goals which we as a country have. We all know what kind of political vision we have, of economy of such a large size, and without power you really couldn't do that, right? And this has to be a basic infrastructure which has to be accessible to everyone, and not just for that, it's also for children studying in remote areas, for education, for everything you need electricity today. So that's where I think the largest opportunity is, which is the mitigation of fossil fuel consumption just to keep yourself powered up. And this also serves the purpose because we actually end up spending a lot of money in terms of import of these fuels. In fact, if I give you data, this is of course a little old report, somewhere in 2014 or 15. The amount of diesel consumed, they figured out the top 3 sectors. First was Indian Railways, second was Indian Defense Forces, and third was telecom towers. So in that order. So obviously, government has been focusing a lot on electrification of railways just to avoid, a huge consumption. And this, as an example, I can also tell you, we did a lot of work in many remote installations. You have ATMs going to rural area when in the previous avatar of NDA government, they came and they brought in a Jan Dhan scheme to give a debit card to everyone, and they opened millions of accounts across the country, to bring the banking to the unbanked people. And they provided a debit card to everyone, then installed ATMs in rural areas, which definitely need power, right? And the situation was that they had hardly any power in many areas, or they had power just for 2 hours. And basis that, we found a lot of opportunity. And as Panasonic, we've done thousands of ATMs which are running today on lithium-ion batteries. So this may not sound a very catchy or a very exciting sort of area, but energy storage has huge potential in many such segments where you are either consuming diesel or you do not have power, which keeps you help run your business. And similarly, even in the larger cities today, in the distribution sector, as I spoke, there are many buildings. I sit in Gurgaon and I walk across the highway. There is Udyog Vihar, where there is each building which is either a ITES service or a manufacturing factory. They have very large diesel generators sitting in their front, and this is occupying not just the very expensive real estate, but also polluting this environment. And this is extremely important. It becomes almost a necessity, because you are running a 24/7 operation, and you can't really afford even a couple of hours of power outage. I think there is a huge opportunity. All these places are sitting opportunity for creating energy storage infrastructure. What we need today is a change in policies where these really distribution assets can become viable today compared to the prices, and also on the power distribution policies what we have, whether it is the time of the day or incentivizing all of these people. So I think there is a huge opportunity in many areas. Wherever there's a building, there is an opportunity.
Thank you, Atul. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
so I don't mind jumping in real quick.
Please.
So AMP, we're trying to turn that battery that you buy from a liability to an asset. So India has an advantage over the US in the fact that even though the power is not as reliable, it has a potential to be reliable with things like vehicle to grid, right? So the Indian government create the right incentives? And you can imagine, and I know probably Chetan's already doing this or thinking about this, but have that batteries plugged in while swapping, have it be able to support the grid, have it be able to clean the grid, stabilize the power. There's a huge value proposition there all the way around. And AMP's trying to basically do that with the battery technology that we're working with as far as providing bidirectional charging.
Yes, just to add to that, you're very right. I think one of the challenges is that you can have storage by itself, but can you also, in the transition to electrification, can you actually have solutions that help the grid versus hurt the grid? So if you were to put up a city infrastructure, say for swapping, reasonable one that it probably would have, you need probably 150 megawatt hours of energy coming, which means you actually are not using it completely. So you can actually support the grid back in peak hours. You also know demand of energy. So new renewable energies that are coming in, you know when they are coming in. And so you can balance things much better. So having buffers at a city level, at every transformer level, right, at a distributed level, right, will allow you to take a less impact of it, because you're not fast charging and then you have nothing, you're actually doing something very uniform throughout a day. And you have probably 80% of the time at night, which you can have buffer, and maybe 30% of the time during the day where you can support the grid. So I think it's about, if a policy around energy and linking that, the mobility side, area where people can buy and sell energy easily comes in, you will start to see such innovative ideas automatically seamlessly integrate, especially with our new policy around where we want to be in renewables. It's an area, if we link it correctly, we can really help the country and create new models.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Maybe one question for you, Diego. Three-wheeler sales, I believe, dropped last year. And so any views on that? And what do you see in terms of numbers, or how many three-wheelers could be completely electric, especially both for passenger but also last mile delivery?
Definitely, as you correctly mentioned, three-wheeler has been, and mainly passenger segment, has been the worst hit in the entire automotive sector. It's the only sector that has not seen any kind of revamp or consistent revamp of demand in the second half of calendar year 2020. And even now, beginning of 2021, so we have seen some better demand in some part of the country. Overall, we are in the range of minus 50 to minus 60% respect to the kind of sales per month that we are used to seeing in the pre-COVID. You can definitely have multiple factors that, how to say, shared mobility and public transportation have not restarted fully in the country. Schools are still closed. Many offices are still in work from home modality. All the IT companies are still in work from home modality. So since last mile demand of mobility has dropped down dramatically, definitely also the sales of this vehicle has been affected quite heavily. As you correctly say, the three-wheeler is basically focused on two segments. One is passenger, and is very much related to the fact that I was mentioning. Last mile transportation for goods has seen a better increase of demand. Also e-commerce that has definitely boomed during COVID, after COVID period, has helped to grow the demand of this vehicle more in any kind of fuel proposition, independent if it's diesel, CNG or electric. So what I see in perspective definitely is a huge potential for electric applied to three-wheeler good transportation in perspective, because need of last mile transportation will be more and more consistent in the next period. That's why we want to focus very much on cargo solution. Passenger very much will depend on the possibility that, again, restriction will across the country, and we will see again more share mobility coming up consistent. I think that is something unavoidable, because the need of mobility in India is something that is unseen in other parts of the world, and three-wheeler definitely is the most affordable solution for this kind of data. So it will come up once the restriction will be lifted. Also, electric passenger will pick up quite consistently. So I see, to answer your question, I see a faster increase of demand for cargo, a little bit slower for passenger, but both will come in the span of the next 2 years.
Thank you, Diego. Thank you very much. So let me try and summarize the session. Firstly, big thanks to the panelists. It's been quite a bit of learning, even for me, and having worked in this sector for many, many years. I believe if I could just summarize it, and please, if I missed anything, please let me know. So, from the panel discussion that we had, it looks like 50 gigawatt hour target is realistic, is achievable. And as you mentioned, Chetan, we did it in the renewables, and I think India should be looking to do that in over the time. I think it again, we discussed, does swapping model work for India? And I think, Chetan, from what you said, absolutely. And Diego, you agreed with that, given your partnership with Sun Mobility, that both charging and swapping model is something that is perhaps very unique to India and will continue to be unique. We talked about why is India not in that pie chart that I showed. And I think, Anil, you made a very good point. It's because maybe we have not invested in material science and chemical engineers. We maybe invested too many in electrical engineers like us. So I think I take that point absolutely. We also discussed, are there any opportunities within value chain where India can excel? So Chetan, you made a very good point. Design is an area where India can also focus on, and not to mention some of the other elements like battery management solutions, power electronics, and others that could be localized. You made a very good point, Chetan, about linking policy on energy and mobility together. And I think totally that's the way forward. And Atul, your feedback on how we can ensure that there, and I loved what you said, is I went into the tower business, I ended in the power business, which a lot of links to Chetan's point. Energy and mobility are going very much hand in hand, and combine that with connectivity and everything else. It's that whole case thing coming together in this sector. So your point about applications and support, and how India's power shortage and the grid stability is important as part of it. And Diego summarized it very well in his last point. There's excellent potential for electrification in two-wheelers and three-wheelers in India. And that very much is where the volumes in India will come from in the short term, while we ramp up on 4, 8, and 16-wheelers in the future. Anything I missed, panelists? Anything you'd like to add? Last one word or sentence? No? Good. Excellent. Well, let me thank you, everybody. Let me thank ETAuto, and I wish you the best. And I hope to get back with you again and then debate on what we projected and if it came true or not. Thank you very much, everybody, today.
Thank you everyone for sharing your inputs around cell and battery manufacturing in India. Stay tuned for the next session.